I did at first, so different ways of cooking chicken. You know how you put egg battered chicken. So um, it didn't catch on the broadcast, but that's okay. The chicken is currently frying. Hold on a minute. The chicken battered two ways. One, I battered the chicken in egg wash, and then I put it in flour. And the other one, that was how we learned it at how to batter chicken at the restaurant. And the other one, I just battered the chicken. I just rinsed it and just put it in a flour mixture and no egg wash, because really my mother didn't use egg wash. And what she said to me was, using egg wash will really be a waste of eggs because she had 6 children. So she just took it and rinsed it, um, seasoned the flour, and battered it that way. All right. I'm frying the chicken. And so what I was trying to talk to you about is recipes and different recipes and recipe books. Um, each recipe is supposed to represent a community or family. So everybody don't cook the same, the exact same way, or do things the same way. And when we were little, we were in school. And one of the things we learned in school is how to convert a recipe. Now, when we was little and we was learning math, I went and told my mother how they was teaching us how to convert a recipe. We were in like grade school. So when I went to talk to her about it, she started explaining to me how when people came from different communities, they always did not know how to read or write, especially African Americans. Some places, even in her generation, they were forbidden to learn to read and write. So one of the things they had to do was teach them how to convert their recipes to the point where they could write them down on a book, or to find out what kind of recipes they had. So what they did was they took bowls or containers, and then they asked them to put the ingredients in the bowls that they would put in their cakes or pies, or season their food with the ingredients that they would usually use, if it was a dab, a dibble, a handful, a pinch. And then they took, and nowadays they would probably weigh it, but then they took and measured it with a measuring spoon. Yeah, if it was a fourth of inch, not a fourth of inch, but a fourth of a teaspoon, a third of a tablespoon, 1 cup, 2 cups, to convert the recipes to create a recipe book of that family and to show them how to do that. What are you doing? So a recipe was usually from the family, the tribe, the community, the farm. And recipes were handed down from one generation to the other. And learning how to convert your recipes was the beginning of education coming to your community. And when we come together and we eat, and people bring different dishes at home, from home, there is a basic way to cook, but people add, it's what you call a basic recipe, like the basic recipe for Creole. The basic recipe is what the recipe starts off with. But do you think Creole was created in Virginia? Creole was not a part of Virginia. That was a part of Louisiana. Now, one thing about recipes. New York cook one way, Virginia cook another way, Louisiana cook another way, Georgia cook another way. There is no, hey, this is how you do it. That don't exist. What exists is people coming together as a community from different communities to show their recipes and to teach their family way of doing things. And so the cookbook is us sharing. It's us sharing, community sharing, the way they cook and how they do things. The cookbook, how to clean up, how to sew, it's all a part of sharing. But out of these cookbooks, out of these regions, out of these areas, from these tribes, from these different states, in these different parts of America and different parts of the world, comes a basic recipe. Now in Virginia, I know we had the Maryland crab cake. I know we had eggnog. I know we had those recipes. Whole cake bread, that's Native Americans. Flour and water. It's just flour and water cooked like a pancake. So I know we had all of those recipes. See, but I don't know all the recipes of Virginia. Bear stew. Bear stew, man. But some people really do hunt bears in some parts of the world. Hunting bear is not illegal. Bear stew. They had a recipe for bear stew. That was the Native Americans. Bear stew with dumplings. Beef stew with dumplings. Yeah, because bear stew with dumplings. That was a recipe. That Yorkshire pudding, that came from Europe. I think that's where bear stew with dumplings come from. So recipes change. They bend. And each generation changes the recipe just like each generation changes. And I can get a cookbook from the 70s, and it's not like a cookbook from 2000. And I could get a cookbook from 2000, from the 1800s, and it's not like a cookbook now. I looked up a recipe from the 1800s. I said, I want to try this recipe. I never did do it. But that's where I was trying to find a recipe for funded. And I found one for American funded. American funded, no vinegar. Sugar and water. That was American funded. No vinegar. No vinegar. No vinegar. That's the recipe for American funded. And I was looking it up, and I looked all the way back then to funded, and I found that old American recipe from like the 1800s or something. Yeah, because I couldn't find they want gum paste and this and this. I said, no, it's a way I can make this with agave. And I looked up the American recipe for funding. The European recipe is vinegar. But hey, let's get to cooking. I saw two people cooking it the exact same way. So that tells me they're from the same region of Jamaica. And so, what else I looked online I cooked? When I was looking up wonton soup, I saw 3 or 4 different versions of that. And so it was from different countries and different regions of Asia. And they all were cooking it differently, but the same. And so, chicken curry. I just looked it up in 2 countries. That was Africa and Asia. And they really cooked it differently. They did. They cooked it differently. And then when you look up chicken curry in different regions of, well, no, it was a rice dish. Oh, Lord. An African rice dish that's made with tomatoes. And, yeah, I looked that up. It was different in every country. But every country cooked it. It was a rice dish. I know the name of it. I hate when that happens. Every country, this rice dish was different in every country. In one country they baked it. The other country they cooked it on top of the stove. And one country they put a lot of seafood in it. And the other country they didn't. So recipes help us to know each other and learn each other's food. That's one reason I love being up here on YouTube, looking up different recipes, learning how to cook things I've never cooked in my life, and seeing different ways of cooking that same dish. I said there's no way oatmeal set in a bowl in the refrigerator overnight. And I was trying to find out how to make granola. And so somebody shared their recipe for the granola. And they sit the oatmeal in the refrigerator overnight. And it's soaking up the water. So it's cooking. It's soaking up whatever you put it in. Milk or water or whatever you put it in. It's soaking up the flavors. And then they just added nuts and berries and said, now this is granola. I said, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for crunchy granola. And do you not know that recipe became a hit on YouTube and all over the world? And now even oatmeal use it. Oatmeal, Quaker, even they use it. They use that recipe now. Oatmeal in the refrigerator overnight. Yeah. So it's a sharing. It's not so much what somebody like and what somebody don't like. You never know what they're going to like that you do. And you just share it with us. Well, you didn't capture the first part of the video, but that's one thing I'm doing in my videos. I'm sharing with you my way of doing things and the way I've learned from other people to do things, and how each kitchen or each chef does things in a different way. And it's so great to be able to learn all their ways of doing things. You know, you go in one kitchen, they do things this way. You go in another kitchen, I'm going to show you another way to season the steak. I'm going to show you another way to do this. You got to do this. Use these seasons, not that, and then you just have, learn, so much from different people. If I could get you to share with us what you know, it would be great. Your knowledge of cooking. Your knowledge of doing things. You know, I'm sharing with you how I cooked. It probably didn't pick up the first part of this video, but I'm sharing with you how I cook. I like to learn how you do things. How your tribe cook. How your family cook. How your mother taught you to cook. How do your aunt cook? My grandmama, she had a McCormick rack on her wall. Now, McCormick is old. I found out McCormick is old because I found pictures of McCormick in Virginia from way back. But she had a whole rack when I was growing up of McCormick flavorings and seasonings that she cooked from. While my grandma cooked mostly in an iron skillet. My aunt cooked in those chromatic pots, not the chromatic pots, but they're not porcelain. It is a pot that looks like porcelain. It's not a chromatic pot. It's a different type of pot. I'm going to look it up and let you know what it is. But she cooked from those pots. My grandma also used those glassware. But she cooked her cakes in an iron skillet in her cornbread. We cooked in all those different pans. The chicken is getting there, and I'm getting ready to put on the broccoli. And I'm boiling me some hot tea. So a lot of things. Well, food is also comfort food. I started doing mukbangs up here, and I started talking about where did I eat the first time I ate certain dishes. I can't tell you when I first ate chicken. All I can tell you is I never said, no, I'm not eating that bird. That's all I can tell you about chicken. But in my community, recipes also welcome communities. If they were doing a cookbook with somebody, then that means that community was now learning how to read and write and learning how to do arithmetic. And they became a part of us. And we have gained the knowledge from them of how they cook and prepare chicken, how they cook food. Yes, we have gained knowledge from them. Not just how they cook food, but how they build, even though they couldn't read and write. Yeah. They just took and brought reading and writing into what they already know. I had an uncle that couldn't read or write, but he built houses. He built you anything you wanted. He was a trained builder. He could build a house from a diagram. I got to tell you, welcome to the African American community of America. Freedom African Americans had schools, and at some point they could go to the same school as Caucasians. That was when we first were free, and then came Jim Crow, and then came the segregated schools. Segregated schools in parts of America where segregation was allowed. In some parts of America, they went back to being slaves. I had a family member that once said, don't tell North Carolina. For a long time. The family member kept saying they were a slave, they were a slave, they was a slave. They were from my grandma generation. They were a slave, they were a slave. And then all of a sudden they started saying, don't tell North Carolina I'm here, because they realized they were free. And so now, in their mind, they were running away from North Carolina because North Carolina still had plantations with people on it. Virginia had plantations in some areas, but in the area my family from, they were sharecroppers. That was like a plantation. Another form of plantation, but a lot of this area that I'm from, African Americans here, they own part of town. Well, this is about education, yeah. My mama's generation, and not so much my mama's generation, not from this area, because they made them go to school. And they had truancy in this area in her generation. But they were the free and the bound. Some of them believed they were free. Some of them believed they were bound. Some of them were still on the farm. Some of them were off of the farm. And the family member that couldn't read or write, he worked as a builder. So whatever farm he worked on, they worked as builders. And they built houses and all of that. And no, they didn't know how to read and write. But they were builders. And he was raised to build buildings and work as a laborer and build bathrooms and, build things. Like, he had a shoebox from way back, a shoe shine box that he had built. He just knew how to build you anything you wanted without education, yes. And the women knew how to cook. Some of them were chefs. Some of them were, chefs. Some of them were not just somebody who could sew. They were designers in their own right. Even though they didn't know how to read and write, yeah. And when you went to them, even though they were adults, you brought education. And one way you could communicate is through food. We're going to take your book, how you cook, and we're going to put it in a book. And that's one way they communicated to the women, by teaching them how to cook. Not how to cook, but by converting their recipes to so that other people in other communities can read them. I saw 2 recipes from back then. African Americans had a recipe book I had looked up way up when, and I saw a couple of recipes that I want to try. I like I said, I first started that looking up how to make fondant, because I couldn't find a recipe from scratch for fondant. And I found this one recipe, it said vinegar. And then I found another recipe and it had no vinegar in it. And so that was the American way of doing it. So I decided to go with that. And so I'm trying to make fondant. Yes, I am. As soon as I learn how to decorate a cake, no, I'm going to try to make fondant. I'm going to try to make fondant. And then I'm trying to, decorate with it. Yeah, because I'm always trying to figure out how can I eat this cake with frosting and no sugar. Well, all frosting is sugar frosting. So when they came to young people, the little children, they had to educate the adults too. The adult that wanted to be educated, excuse me. Some of them said, well, I'm a slave. And when they said that, that means they weren't going to get educated. They weren't going to learn how to read and write. They were refusing. To learn to read and write. That's exactly what that meant. They were refusing education. They called you names. They called them names. Yes, they did. But sometimes they will refuse to be educated. But you had to educate the adults and the children, and when that happened, you had to educate the child. Tell them their child got to go to school. And that was done with, with the city and the permission of the city and all that. Otherwise, they were going to rebel, I guess. Some of them did rebel. Some of them just said, we slaves. You can educate my child, but we slaves. Some of them talk like that. That's what I was taught. Some of them talk like that. Some of them say, we're just slaves. We're just black Negroes. We don't need education because we're just slaves. Some of them talk like that. And some of them did get educated. Some of them were nonviolent and, nobody bothered them. But the children had to learn to read and write. Okay. Hello. And welcome to my Mukbang. I have broccoli and fried chicken. I have tea and water for life, and water that sustains life and brings life. I thank you for this food I'm receiving, Jesus, for your goodness, your mercy, your kindness, for all your many blessings. I say thank you, Jesus, for the victory in the mighty name of Jesus. Okay. And so, food is how we share the recipe book. We're sharing the way our family do things, the way we do things, what we have learned. And we're bringing it to other communities who do things differently. And with that, we begin to communicate with each other. So, I'm broadcasting, yeah, in the refrigerator,
The one rubbed it?
Mm-hmm. You got some hot sauce. You can share. Oh. And so food starts the conversation. These people coming to help you Also have to teach your children. I just you got a box of Yock. Oh,
Baby, let me get mine out.
you got a box of Yock.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
You sitting there, mouth full of fried chicken and everything. Come on, you gotta go for Yock. Eat your chicken.
Well, I want some Yock.
Don't let my bowl melt. Open the windows of heaven. Pour me out a blessing. Won't be able to
See that chicken better.
Gonna be.
What kind of Yock you got? What kind of Yock you got?
This is plain.
Yeah, go on there. So think of some food now about to bring me. Bring me together. Together with Brendan them. Broadcaster. I'm on YouTube.
Oh, you on YouTube now?
Mm-hmm.
What you want? That's mine.
Oh, he said shrimp, y'all.
Hey, which one you got? Chicken?
I got plain.
No, I said shrimp.
I put,
You got me plain
yeah,
that one.
but you could get some chicken. I forgot. I'm sorry. Put some chicken out that bowl. I'll put it in there.
I'm gonna wait till I get my stuff. You heard I got an interview tomorrow? Yeah, you want to come? That's good, man.
Together. Get me some Yock. It's Yock from the store. So, I come from a part of American society where the women worked. Yeah. But it was a lot of hidden talent in people. And some of the African American movie stars from my mom's generation could read or write. It surprised me somewhat that Hollywood didn't make an effort to educate them. To make sure they could learn some things. That's Brenda.
Why is these over here?
But some of them didn't. Some of the African Americans didn't know how to read and write. It wasn't nothing that, because some places they came from, they were still on the farm like slaves. And some of them, they were migrant workers, which in my community was considered slavery. So, of course, most of the people from my older sister generation, in my generation, people born in the 50s, know how to read and write. Uncle Charlie, he told me, that was my grandmama's brother. He said, yeah, they had a school. But back then, I didn't even know they had school buses in the 20s. And in the 1900s. And he said they had schools, but they walked to school. So it was something different. They walked to school while the Caucasians rode the bus. I said to myself, I didn't even know they had buses. One of these days, I'm going to do a video called Yock versus Jack. Because they sell both of them in this city. Yock and Yak.
What?
Yak is the Yock noodles with the egg. And it has a sauce on it. But the Asians sell it. So that was what I was thinking about doing, that Yock versus Yak. And Yock is this. It has a soy sauce. It has just soy sauce, ketchup, onions, peppers. But my uncle, he was telling me that. But they had schools. But when I looked at the census, right, the census said that they didn't graduate. But they were like, they were African, they were African Americans. And, some parts of the government didn't believe that they should know how to read and write. So why would they require them to write down if they got a degree or not? Not a degree, but an education. And I don't know what was going on in the part of Virginia my family was from. Yeah, because my grandma said she graduated the 11th grade. And people keep saying, well, it's not in the census. No, they were very racist back then. There was Jim Crow. Every city didn't want African Americans to learn to read, and everybody didn't go along with it. Even though this was way after the Civil War. Well, not after Jim Crow. All right, y'all. I'm going to finish my box of Yock. Oh, my God. I look like I got enough noodles in here. And I got too much chicken. Somebody else get the chicken. I'd like to say thank you. Subscribe. And comment on my channel. Hey, this is a lot of food.